Namaste. Welcome back. In the study of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, there are 5 blockages or barriers from one realizing their true nature. Patanjali lays out these 5 principles almost like a map. It's as though the author has climbed to the summit of the mountain and is offering the reader and the aspirant a little roadmap of what is ahead. And what the author is saying is that there are 5 predictable, universal, and very ubiquitous traps that the mind falls into. In understanding these, one can liberate the mind more rapidly. If one consciously or unconsciously gets trapped into these patterns, it takes longer to arrive in awakening, to have self-knowledge. So one can listen to these and kind of learn from what has already been discovered, or you can figure this out on your own. But you might find that it's a little bit quicker when you can identify these very natural patterns of the mind and interrupt them a little bit quicker. So they all intersect and weave together, and they all start with the very first principle. And these are called the Kleshas. There are 5 of them. And the very first one is kind of the starting point. And the first Klesha is Avidya. A is non, and vidya is knowledge. So non-knowledge. In a lot of transliterations of the Yoga Sutras, you'll see the word ignorance. That's not exactly what I resonate with. It feels a little harsh, but I think of it as a forgetting. So when one forgets their true nature, they suffer. And in the yoga philosophy and framework, every embodied human has a soul. That soul is the true nature. All other parts of the human will change and fluctuate. The body is impermanent, the senses are impermanent, the mind is impermanent. But this spark of divinity, or the soul, or Atma, is forever. It cannot be changed. It will always exist. And that is one's true nature. In the concept of karma or reincarnation, this is the piece that travels through the hundreds of lifetimes. It weaves the threads of impressions and keeps one bound in a cycle of birth and death. When one liberates the mind, accesses true consciousness, one has the chance for freedom. Samadhi, which is the absorbed state of consciousness, and eventually nirvana, enlightenment. So back to the Kleshas, the first is forgetting one's true nature. And when one forgets their true nature, the second Klesha is Asmita. And Asmita is the concept of ego. So when one forgets their true self, they form a limited understanding of themselves. And that is the ego. So if I think that the only thing that exists is Brian, if I don't realize that there's a different consciousness, a more subtle consciousness that sits within this body and this mind, I will become very identified with this limited understanding of self. So I begin to think of mine and I and me and build my whole world around a limited sense of self. Now, this is fine. There can be positive aspects of ego and understanding who you are in the world, but most of the time this creates suffering because you have now created or fabricated a sense of yourself that is not built on a steady foundation because it's not the true self. And the unfortunate thing is, as soon as most people are born, they're put into this role. You are this, you are from here, these are the things you like, etc. So Asmita becomes this little lens that we're looking out in the world through, forgetting that there's a whole other spectrum of experience that's available. Now, the third and the fourth are built off of Asmita. When I have identification with a limited sense of myself, then I begin to protect that fragile ego. The ego is padded or protected by the third and the fourth kleshas, which are Ragas and Dvesha. Ragas is the idea of pleasure or attachment or craving. I go towards the things that feel good. So I go to the things that make Brian, or the limited understanding of self, feel good. And the fourth is Dvesha. It's the inverse. It's that I go away from the things that are threatening, uncomfortable, or challenging. So clinging to the good, avoiding the uncomfortable. And the fifth, which is a very powerful concept that is kind of a derivation of all of this, the fifth is called Abhinivesha. And Abhinivesha is the fear of dying. Now again, back to this whole concept. If I don't know that there's a part of me that is immortal, that will always live on, and I build my understanding through a limited perception of myself, Brian, in my case, and then I pad that with craving and aversion, I will desperately cling to not dying. Because if I cannot understand that there is a perennial nature to my existence, I have to protect this limited sense of who I am. So fear of dying. So these are the kleshas, 5 layers, 5 predictable roadblocks that one can interrupt by understanding, by having vidya, by having knowledge, wisdom of one's true nature. I hope this is helpful. Have wonderful success in your practices. If you're interested, go to briantobinyoga.com to see more videos. Namaste.